Well, welcome to this briefing for carers and parents for the job shadowing, which we hope will take place next summer. It hasn't happened for the last 2 years. Fingers crossed this will be the year when our students can get back into the workplace and gain some value experience that will guide them in their choices for the future. Our students are preparing for jobs which maybe have not yet been invented. Certainly the working patterns have changed a lot. When I found this picture, it clearly predates COVID because there isn't a home worker there pictured wearing shirt and tie in their underpants. Who knows where the future of work will be for our kids? We don't know, but there will always be certain key skills, attitudes and characteristics which they can pick up a bit in school, but only by getting out into the real world experience of the workplace will they start to realize the need for initiative and good communication and team working, responsibility and reliability. All those things which just a few days in a workplace can really bring home to them. So we really do hope they can get out and have this experience. So anything you can do to support them, whether it is actually a virtual experience that they get, as some of our students have had in the last 24 months, or it's an actual experience in a workplace environment, it'll be fantastic. Now, the last time we did this was 2019. And I sampled some of what the students said when they came back. And I want to give you some examples now just to encourage you about the value of doing this if you don't yet believe me. And some of the places that they went to. Here's the first one. Went to, well, I don't think it's quite a garage, but all the students were asked what was the hardest thing that they had to do, and this student said it was changing the brake calipers on a car, which is quite a big thing if you ask me. I've not done that myself. I've changed the oil, I've changed tires, I've changed filters, but nothing like that. So here's, you know, a 15-year-old child doing quite adult activity, and they said, yeah, their biggest learning was getting more mechanical skills. I think they might have had an interest in mechanics and cars already, but it pushed them further. Here's an interesting one, a child who went to a first school. Now I happen to know that this child was one of the lads. I don't think that going to the first school was what they really wanted to do, and there's a message here about finding a job shadowing placement anywhere, even if it's not in the area of work that a student is looking for, because those skills which I mentioned earlier about initiative and responsibility and communication, they're transferable wherever you work. And so any experience in any workplace is good. This lad who went to the first school said the hardest thing was, there you go, singing in assembly. A long time since they've done that. But what's really great is what they said their biggest learning was. I'm good with kids. That lad learned something from his work experience, and he would take that forward. Maybe he would learn that from that he's going to be a successful dad, or maybe it'll encourage him to take a career working with kids in sport or in schools, education, whatever. Next one. It's quite difficult to get into the Crown Court. When this happens, I had to sign a special paper for the student, and I happen to know the student who did this was quite a bit of a backroom lawyer themselves, you know, quite willing to stand up and say something in class, not always on the topic of which we were studying, shall I say. And they found the hardest thing not interrupting. I could imagine them wanting to stand up and tell the barrister or the judge just how they interpreted it, just how they thought it was. But they had a big learning, and their biggest learning was that they learnt to work better with people, developing their skills there. Here's another one. Somebody went to a machinery dealership, some form. Hardest thing? Sitting in an office. And actually there's a message here about students thinking, oh, I'll just go to so-and-so's place and I can be in the office. Actually just sitting there with not much to do is a bad thing. And what they need to consider when they're asking for a job shadowing place and when they're on job shadowing is to make sure they take some initiative. And if they do end up twiddling their thumbs, they're looking around and offering to help people, or could I come and observe what you're doing? Could I learn about that? You know, even if it's just, I know it sounds bad, making the tea, at least becoming part of the team and making a contribution is better than just sitting around waiting for something to happen. So yeah, by sitting around not doing much, they didn't learn much. So making sure that the job shadowing placement is beneficial is the responsibility as much as the student as the workplace to taking the initiative, and whoever they've been given to supervise them having a dialogue with them and saying, well, could I do this? Can I try this tomorrow? Last one here, somebody went to our electronic designers, they were creating a circuit design. I think that's quite interesting, actually creating something for the company, but their learning was, yeah, how long the work days are compared to school, because yes, school 8:45 finishes at 3:10. On job shadowing, students are expected to do more than that, maybe between 7 and 8 hours, certainly not more than 8, but the full working day they ought to experience. So what is job shadowing? Well, it takes place in the summer, and it's 3 or 5 days in a workplace as a role as a trainee or an employee. So it's the workplace that takes full responsibility for the student because they are there as their employee or trainee. It's only 3 days for students doing D&V. So there's this week where students doing D&V may be on expedition Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and then they do their job shadowing Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or they may do job shadowing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and they do their D&V expedition Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Now, it always happens that students say, well, can you tell me which expedition, am I going the first half of the week or the second half of the week? And we can't say at this point in time. It's far too early for our planning of D&V. And it's best to just get that placement with a workplace and say, well, it will be for 3 days in this week. And if they really need to tie things down, then go and contact Mrs. Hayden, who's in charge of the bronze D&V, who'll make a note of the dates that you need to have for your work experience. So make sure that the expedition that you're on will be in the first or second half of the week, depending on the workplace's needs. There you go. It's the 11th to 15th of July 2022. That's the date of the week. It's probably on the school calendar if you've seen it already, so make a note of that now. Key thing is that the students have to find the placement. We don't have a database in school of workplaces that have given placements before. We don't maintain that or anything like that. That costs a lot of money, and there is a service that some schools buy into, but it costs thousands of pounds, thousands, to have that in place, and so it's something we don't have. Now, we have run job shadowing and work experience very successfully all the years right up until 2019 without having that service. We find it's a good lesson in resourcefulness and initiative, and yes, there are some students who come and say, I'm really struggling, and we have a chat with them, some ideas, and maybe at the very end we've got a handful that we end up using in school, asking BAM to work with, or some of the support staff in school. But really it's much better to find your own placement and say, yeah, I got that, and then benefit from it. So yes, start looking now. Use your networks, get out there. So how it works, back in October I did an assembly with students about job shadowing, so hopefully they've already started talking to you about it, and talking to tutors as well. We've done some work with them, and only last week on the afternoon of Thursday the 11th, we had what we call our Futures Afternoon, and they were working on booklets to prepare them for work experience, job shadowing, and started to work on their CVs using a tool called Zello, Xello. And if you haven't seen it, ask your student to show you. They can access it on their phones. The login is based on their school Microsoft Office 365 login, so they need to use their school username and password to log in and say it's an Office 365 login. If they're not logging into school on a school device, if they're using their own phone or a home PC, they'll have to use their school login details. But it'd be great for them to show you the research they've been doing about possible jobs and careers that fit them, and the CV they've been working on. So this moment now is on that block on the diagram there, talking to you. It says an online form sent out. I think this year we're going to go back to paper because there's the form, which you'll get a little glimpse of, requires signatures from the student, from yourselves as the responsible guardian, and from the workplace. And electronically it's difficult to achieve that. So it's going to be a paper-based form. And we've just got, it's not quite ready. There's a little question to how we can make it even better than previous years. And so it will come out on an email, and hard copy will also be given to students as a prompt. And the big date, there we go, we want forms back by the 18th of February. Now that's the Friday just before the half term. And why? I mean, that's months before the summer when the job shadowing is, but we really push you to get things in early. And I know that it might be, there's some factors at play here about how easy it is to get a placement. We know that we're pushing this in South Bromsgrove. We know that other schools in the area are not pushing it. So maybe there may be more places available for our kids out there, but COVID, Brexit and the economic situation means that there's a lack of confidence maybe out there in some businesses to take on places. So there's some swings and roundabouts going there, but we will support you and talk to businesses that have questions about this if they're struggling to say yes to you. Some myths to bust. Employers are not barred from taking students that are under 16, which our students will be when they're approaching for job shadowing. They can say no if it's a hazardous environment. And it's possible that the company policy might not be to take under 16s. They might actually have a policy, but it's not against the law for them. So if you push and explain that it's actually job shadowing more than work experience, so they don't actually have to do anything. They can observe but get the experience of being there. They don't have to be given tasks which the company doesn't want to give them. And I'll give you an example a few years ago of a student that wanted to go and work in a veterinary practice for their year 10 job shadowing, and the veterinary practice rang me up and said, we don't take under 16s usually, but we want to make an exception in this. Will you allow her? And I said, yes, of course, we will allow that student. If you can write the risk assessment, that's fine. And of course, they'll modify the risk assessment. Okay, they're under 16, they can't do this, but they can do that. So don't be fobbed off by businesses and workplaces saying, sorry, don't take anybody under 16. Say, well, unless it's in your company policy, could we talk about what they could and can't do if you're saying that it's too hazardous or there are some things they can't have the responsibility for. Don't be too pushy, but try and have that dialogue. An issue about safety in the workplace, going on from that, and hazardous environments. As I mentioned, students are considered to be employees of the placement provider, so health and safety is their responsibility. It's not the schools. They have the primary responsibility, and they should have risk assessments written for trainees or visitors to their workplace, and it's your right to ask them to show you that risk assessment. And it would be something to do to make sure that you've seen also a copy of their insurance for covering trainees. If they can't show you a copy of insurance, the employer's liability insurance that's got a clause in it about trainees and people on job shadowing or work experience, then I'd wonder about taking that placement. And it's one of the questions on the form that we have for you to say that yes, you've seen that insurance document and you are happy for your child to go to that workplace. If you're concerned, ask questions. The student needs to ask questions, and it could be just something simple about, personal protective equipment. Will you provide me with overalls, a hard hat and toe cap boots, or do I have to go out and buy them? Hopefully there's no cost involved, and a workplace would say, no, it's okay, we've got stuff for you, but it's worth asking the question. If a student is ever concerned about anything on their job shadowing placement, then they ought to contact the school immediately and say, I'm being asked to do this, I don't think I can do that. And they have the right to say, and they should be understanding in the workplace, the right to say, no, I'm afraid that's something I can't do. And that's fine. There should be no problem in doing that. So where can you do this? Well, there are loads of places you can do your job shadowing. Those just a few examples. It can be a non-profit organization. It can be almost like a full-time volunteer. That's fine. It doesn't have to be in a business, or it could just be a social enterprise. You'll see on the right hand side there's something about working with parents. It is possible to do that, or working with families. There's always a case then that it doesn't work out, and what the student doesn't gain is that experience working with an adult that they're not familiar with, and gaining the confidence they get from that. So just, although it may be a default and you could offer it to somebody else who isn't your own child, I'm just a bit cautious of just saying it's okay, you can go work with Aunt Sally in her hair salon, or Uncle Bob, whatever. If there's no challenge there. Maybe it is a family business, but the supervisor is unknown to the child, which is a good way forward. So what do you need to do now? Well, students should follow all the advice we've given on the booklet, and they were given a hard copy, and if they haven't taken it away from school, it's on their school email. They should think about what would suit them best. They need to prepare a CV to hand out to people, and that they should have been working on Zello, or maybe they've used a template they've found online. Ask them to show you Zello. It really is very powerful. They've got research possibilities around, and that could be anywhere, but they've got to start asking. Now, you all have networks, and networks are so important for success nowadays. We have our digital networks and just our social networks, our personal one-to-ones. So the ones that you have within your own communities and the kids have, get asking and start using that. Obviously, you can search online, the internet, trade pages, talk to your own colleagues, talk to friends and neighbors, get the kids out there asking. Now, I always get this question, I think I've covered it in the frequently asked questions, that some students come and say, I've been offered a work placement, a job placement, but it's not in the week. Well, we have agreed for students to take placements out of the designated time, but there's a big but on this. It generally only is for those companies that, like Jaguar Land Rover is the example there, have fixed times that they do job placements and work experience, and you can't do it any other time and say, okay, you're going off to work with this big international company for a week. Yes, that's fine. If it's the local store, we'd rather that you fix that into the week that we're talking about. And if you're given that permission to do work experience job shadowing outside of our fixed week, you don't get the time off in the summer. You're still expected to find something else in that time. Okay, that's really, really clear. There won't be a program in school. It's a dedicated week for work experience job shadowing. So if you do get something with a great company that's saying we'll take you, but only at this time, we first of all have to authorize that, and if we do, you still have to find something to take you through that week in the summer. So start looking, make sure your kids are completing their CVs. There's the deadline, that's the key date, Friday the 18th of February, and there's what the form will look like that you'll need to fill in, which will be sent out to you on email when we've finally finalized it, which I hope will be in the next week or so. Thank you for listening. There were frequently asked questions on the document I sent on the email, and there's my email address in case you need to come back to me for anything else. Thank you very much.